Welcome to Disconnected. Here's another classic insight into Jordan Peterson's brain. This is, I'll put the link below. It's a long discussion and there's a lot of things said, but there's something that really, really stands out in how he phrases something, which kind of, I fear that there's a certain amount of truth in it, but the fact that from an actual reality and how people act, not how it should be, I need to make this very clear. But for somebody like him saying that kind of validates it, which is, I think, the biggest issue I have here. Is like, in practice, yeah, and it probably was a bit like that in the past, but for somebody in his status and especially his fucked up following, they would take this as, oh yeah, this is some sort of truth now, so we'll just run with it, right? Instead of saying, well, okay, this is probably how it is, and this is probably what would make it better, but it's really, 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 really wrong to think like this, and we should really not think like that, and we should really try a bit harder. I think that's the biggest problem I have with this, having toiled over this video for a few days now, because I saw it a couple of days ago and I thought to myself, Jesus Christ. Now, the problem is there's always two things to something. Like there's the way that it probably plays out in reality, and then there's what we should as a society be striving for. And absolutely, as a society, we should not be striving for any of the kind of stuff that is kind of alluded to here. Anyway, this goes about the fact, like, there was a time in the past where rape wasn't really a crime against the woman. It was actually a crime against the woman's husband, or the woman's father, depending on her age, etc. But the crime wasn't really counted against the woman itself, which is unbelievably atrocious if you think about it. So you know what? I'll just let you hear what he says.
That's worth pondering. You talked about one of the advantages of the sexual revolution was the transformation of the idea that rape was a property crime, let's say, into a crime against the woman herself. And I would say, look, I have plenty of sympathy for that perspective, and I think it's fundamentally true. But I'm going to push back because, all this is all very complicated. It isn't obvious to me that offers women enough defense. And so the counter argument might be, if untrammeled sexual access to a young woman is a crime, in order for that to be recognized as a crime properly, it has to be viewed as something that will bring the males on her side to her defense in principle. Now, maybe not, right? Because you could say, well, maybe we could set up a society where merely, quote, transgressing the rights of a woman to say no is sufficient. But it's not obvious to me that that's sufficient. Like, maybe sufficient means not only do you violate the integrity of the woman in a fundamental sense, but you enrage all of her male protectors. And then that's enough of a barrier, because God only knows how much barrier we need. And obviously, well, you just laid out a bunch of problems, especially now that the pill introduces, and we should stress that. The problem that women have in saying no once they're on the pill is that it's instantly personal. And that means the woman has to deliver a pretty hard blow. And that's especially problematic if she's somewhat potentially interested in the guy, right? How do I say no without hurting his feelings, alienating him, making him into an enemy, looking like a prude? And I mean, when you're 16, you don't know the answer to any of those questions. Like, you're not sophisticated enough to. And I saw this in my clinic.
So you see what I mean? So he's basically arguing that for women to be taken seriously when they have been raped, you also need a man in her life that somehow feels like, something's been done to his property. They've got to have a man invested in the woman for the rape to count as anything, or to be a deterrent for others. Now, I can fully imagine that there are some people who think like that they will not rape a woman because they think there might be some repercussion from some other guy. But isn't this the whole problem? Isn't this the whole reason why the likes of Peter Jordanson is so kind of like questioned? Because we as a society are striving towards a place where this sort of thought pattern does not exist anymore, right? And let me tell another thing about 16-year-olds. I don't know where you fucking live, right? But I'm pretty sure our modern 16-year-olds know exactly what the fuck they want and when somebody is going too far. And if they don't, that might just be a reason. The reason might just be because the education system and the parenting was just shit. Because my fucking kids know exactly when somebody's going to be overstepping their mark. And they're about that age. Why? Because our schools teach them about sexual encounters, the pros and cons of all these things, of porn, of pressures from society, of Instagram, of all these things. It's about education. Educate the people so that they know. And somebody, a 16-year-old, is not too young to learn. In fact, it's probably beneficial to them to be able to protect themselves. It is ridiculous to say that. I mean, just the fact that he uses the word, he uses it quite often in this whole thing. Oh, certain situations are very sophisticated. They're sophisticated for some. He even at some point says something about sophisticated for a woman. It's like there's like this inherent underlying, like, I don't want to be I don't want to be anti-feminist, but I kind of am, kind of like vibe that you get all the time when he's talking. Now, from a pure psychological point of view, I don't doubt that there is certain truths that he said about the behavior and why people behave in a certain way. But and maybe I'm misinterpreting what he's trying to do. Maybe he's just trying to be realistic and say, well, this is how people are, so this is how we should possibly do things. But at the same time, I feel like somebody that has his audience, that has his, ears hanging on him, has ears hanging on his lips, he is in a position to actually make things better, if you know what I mean. Like, if you have all these incels and all these wannabe masculine people hanging on every word he says, and he's literally the new Jesus to them, then obviously speak from knowledge and experience and education, and that certain things are the way they are. Because that's the biggest problem I have with Jordan Peterson. Like, a lot of what he says is 100% accurate. But the part where he, in my opinion, fails is that he doesn't use that knowledge to try and better society. Because he will say something, and if you understand how, well, the way I understand people is like, I will take from what he says what I want. So if he phrases something like he did in this piece, where a woman can only be taken seriously when she's been raped if there's a male investment in it. If the wrong people will take the wrong message from that, they will go, oh yeah, that's right. So this woman doesn't have a boyfriend or doesn't have a father in her life, so she's fair game. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? There's this opportunity I always feel he misses with saying, well, so if he says something that might be true to a certain demographic, that's maybe the way they think, or that maybe how we are built, he misses that opportunity to then say, well, but we should be better, right? So that's not the way it should be, and we should not, be like that. That's where I think the real failing is here. Anyway, thanks for watching.